All right, so today we're going to deep dive into Bitcoin price predictions. And our source material is this YouTube video.
Okay.
And this guy uses a technique called Elliott Wave analysis to kind of try and forecast future trends.
Oh, wow.
Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't really looked into it too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically, like you said, forecasting trends by
Yeah, it's all about trying to find these
yeah.
repeating patterns in the way that the price moves up and down.
Yeah,
And
yes,
then
bro.
and then trying to extrapolate from that,
Yeah.
what could happen next.
I always think of it almost like ripples in a pond.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like when you throw a rock in a pond and those ripples spread out
Yeah.
and they form like a distinctive pattern.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but with price action.
Yeah. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So this YouTuber, he used Elliott Wave to kind of analyze what he thinks is going to happen to Bitcoin in the short term.
Okay.
And he starts out by saying, Bitcoin's kind of in a sideways range right now.
Right.
Have you heard that term before?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like the price isn't really moving up or down significantly.
Yeah, so if you think about a price chart as like a landscape,
Yeah.
like a sideways range would be like this flat plane.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Where it's kind of bouncing between these two levels.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like stuck in a holding pattern.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Waiting for some signal to break out.
Totally. Yeah.
So what does he think is going to happen next? Like once it...
He actually thinks that a downward trend is more likely.
Okay.
In the short term.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is that just like a gut feeling, or is he basing that on something?
He uses a couple of technical indicators to kind of back that up.
Which ones?
RSI and MESID.
Okay.
Yeah.
So RSI is Relative Strength Index. What is that?
So it basically measures the strength of price movements.
Okay.
And it can help identify if an asset is overbought or oversold.
Okay.
So think of it like a thermometer for the market.
Okay.
So like a high RSI suggests that Bitcoin's price might have risen too quickly.
Okay.
And it's due for a correction.
Gotcha.
And then a low RSI would suggest the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah.
And MACD, what is that?
MACD stands for Moving Average Convergence Divergence.
Oh, wow. Patchy.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
And it helps traders spot changes in the trend and momentum of an asset.
Okay.
By comparing two moving averages of Bitcoin's price.
Okay, so basically RSI is like a temperature check.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, is it overheating? Is it cooling down?
Yeah.
And then MACD is more about okay, is the trend shifting?
Exactly.
You got it.
And based on these indicators, he sees signs that, it could be headed for a dip.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I did notice, too, he mentioned global liquidity.
And how that might be playing a role in Bitcoin's price.
Yeah.
He even linked to another video where he analyzes it.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, what is global liquidity and how does that affect Bitcoin?
So, global liquidity basically refers to the amount of money that's available in the global financial system.
Gotcha. So when central banks are printing money.
Exactly. Yeah, like during recessions and stuff.
Yeah.
They pump money into the system.
Right.
That can lead to more money flowing into assets like stocks.
Yeah.
And also Bitcoin.
Okay, so if there's a lot of money sloshing around, it's going to push the price up.
Yeah.
And if it starts to dry up, then that could have the opposite effect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's saying we need to kind of keep an eye on things like M2 money supply, DXY S&P 500.
Right.
All these things can give us clues.
Exactly.
Okay, it's like understanding the currents before you go surfing.
Yeah.
Right?
I like it.
Which way is the tide flowing?
Right.
But let's bring it back to the Elliott Wave analysis for now.
Okay. Yeah.
What does he see happening with Bitcoin through that lens?
So,
how does that play into this?
He believes that Bitcoin is currently moving in this pattern.
Okay.
Called Wave 4.
Wave 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is part of a larger 5-wave cycle that he's identified based on historical price data.
So it's like Bitcoin's on this predetermined path.
That's the idea behind it.
Riding these waves up and down.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
That markets kind of move in these predictable patterns that repeat over time.
Interesting.
Yeah. But even with this framework, there's always room for variation.
Sure.
Multiple scenarios can play out.
So even within this Wave 4 thing,
Right.
there's a couple different ways that things could go.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he actually outlines two main scenarios that he thinks are most likely.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we'll pick up. Yeah. All right, so we've got Bitcoin riding this wave 4 thing. Right. And he's outlined two different scenarios for how this could play out.
Yeah.
What's the first one?
So the first scenario is what he calls a flat correction.
A flat correction, okay.
Yeah.
What does that look like, practically speaking?
So in this scenario, he believes that Bitcoin could dip down to around like $82,000 to $83,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
He seems pretty specific on that number.
Yeah, he highlights what are called support levels.
Okay.
Around that price point.
Yeah, what are support levels?
Yeah, so you can think of support levels like almost like a floor.
Okay.
That's been established based on like previous price action.
Okay.
So when the price drops to a support level, buyers tend to step in.
Okay.
And kind of prevent it from falling further.
It's like people have seen it bounce back from that level before.
Exactly.
And so they're more likely to buy.
Yeah, it's like a psychological barrier almost.
Interesting. Huh?
Yeah, and he's identified several support levels that kind of converge.
Around that $82,000 to $83,000 range.
Gotcha.
Which is why he thinks it's a strong possibility that Bitcoin could find support there.
If it dips.
Yeah, if we see a correction.
Okay, so that's scenario 1, flat correction.
Right.
What's the other path that it could take?
The second scenario is called a triangle pattern.
Triangle pattern. Okay.
Yeah, this one's a little bit more complex.
Right.
It actually involves Bitcoin like rallying upward.
Okay.
Potentially even reaching like $100,000.
Wow.
Yeah, but there's a catch.
There's always a catch.
Of course.
What is it?
It all comes down to something called a resistance level.
Okay.
And in this case, there's a key resistance level at $94,600.
Okay.
So you can think of a resistance level kind of like a ceiling.
Gotcha.
So every time like the price approaches this level in the past, it struggled to break through.
So if it wants to get to $100,000, it has to break through that ceiling.
It needs to like gather enough momentum.
Yeah.
To like shatter that resistance level.
Okay.
At $94,600.
So we got these two competing forces almost.
Yeah.
Support levels, like a floor resistance levels, like a ceiling.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's just stuck in between.
Exactly.
Trying to figure out which way to go.
Yeah.
And right now it sounds like he's saying the flat correction is more likely?
Yeah, I think based on his analysis, the flat correction scenario is slightly more probable. Okay. Just given those strong support levels we talked about.
Right.
But he definitely doesn't rule out the triangle pattern.
Okay.
It's still a possibility.
So before we get into which one he's favoring,
right,
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Global liquidity.
Right.
He only briefly touched on it.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's a pretty important piece of this puzzle.
It's crucial.
So can you break that down for us a bit more?
Absolutely, yeah.
What are the key things that we should be paying attention to?
So, remember, global liquidity basically refers to the amount of money that's circulating in the global financial system. And when there's a lot of liquidity, it tends to boost asset prices, including Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And conversely, when liquidity dries up, that can lead to sell-offs.
Okay.
So what he's suggesting is that we can't just look at Bitcoin in isolation.
Right.
We need to consider like the bigger economic forces at play.
It's like trying to predict the weather.
Totally.
You can't just look at like the temperature in your backyard. You have to look at the bigger system.
Exactly.
So when it comes to global liquidity, what are some of the specific things that we should be looking at? Yeah,
so one of the key indicators that he highlights in this other video is M2 money supply.
Oh.
And this is basically a measure of the total amount of money in circulation in an economy.
So if M2 is going up, that means there's more liquidity.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's probably bullish for Bitcoin.
Yeah. Another important indicator is the U.S. dollar index, or DXY.
Okay, what's that?
This measures the value of the U.S. dollar against a basket of other major currencies.
So if the dollar is weak, Bitcoin's strong.
Yeah, that's often the case.
Yeah.
When the dollar weakens, it makes Bitcoin relatively more attractive to international investors.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And the last one he mentioned is the S&P 500.
Right, the S&P 500.
How does that factor in?
So the S&P 500 is a stock market index that tracks the performance of 500 large companies listed on U.S. exchanges.
Okay.
It's often seen as kind of a barometer for the overall health of the U.S. economy and the global economy as a whole.
So if the S&P is doing well, that means the economy is doing well.
Right, and that could spill over into the crypto market.
Okay.
Yeah. So by understanding these global liquidity factors, we can get a better sense of whether the overall environment is supportive of a Bitcoin rally or not.
Okay, so if those indicators are looking good, then that triangle pattern could be even more likely.
It could add fuel to the fire.
Yeah. And if liquidity dries up, then that increases the chances of the flat correction.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So it's like having a roadmap, but also being aware of the traffic conditions and potential detours along the way.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So we've got these two scenarios, and then we've got global liquidity, which is kind of a wild card.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could really influence which scenario plays out.
This is starting to paint a clearer picture for me now.
Cool.
So given all of this, what does this expert think?
Yeah. Which way is he leaning?
Yeah. Okay, so which way is he leaning?
He's favoring the flat correction scenario.
Okay.
Yeah, he thinks those support levels we were talking about, around $82,000 and $83,000, they're pretty strong.
Yeah.
He thinks those could act as like a magnet for the price if we see a pullback.
So a dip down to the 80,000 range.
Yeah, that seems to be the most likely play.
Okay.
At least in the short term.
But he's not ruling out the rally to $100,000.
No, not at all. Especially if those global liquidity conditions are favorable.
Right, because that could really push it up there.
Exactly. Yeah, if Bitcoin manages to break through that resistance level at $94,600 and those global liquidity indicators stay strong, it could definitely make a run for it.
Yeah, it's like Bitcoin is at a crossroads.
It really is.
And we've got these two paths laid out in front of it.
Yeah.
And all these factors, the Elliott Wave patterns, the support and resistance levels, global liquidity, they're all pushing and pulling, trying to decide which path it takes.
Yeah, it's a dynamic system.
It really is.
And I think that's what makes this analysis so valuable.
Yeah.
It helps us think in terms of probabilities and scenarios rather than trying to pinpoint an exact price target.
Because that's impossible.
It is. Yeah, especially in a market like crypto.
Right. So it's more about understanding the different possibilities and then managing our risk.
Exactly.
So for someone listening to this who's maybe thinking about investing in Bitcoin, what's the key takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is patience is key. There's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Yeah.
We've got these two scenarios that could unfold. Global liquidity is still a wild card.
Right.
Rushing into a decision based on one indicator could be risky.
Yeah. So wait and see.
Exactly. Yeah. See how those support and resistance levels play out. Keep an eye on those global liquidity indicators. Make a decision when the picture becomes more clear.
Okay. So basically don't FOMO.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't panic.
Don't panic.
Just wait and see.
Just be patient.
Be patient and gather the information.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
This has been a really cool deep dive.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Learned a lot.
I know, me too.
About Elliott Wave analysis, but also this whole idea of global liquidity.
It's really interesting how it all ties together.
Yeah, how it all kind of plays into the bigger picture.
Right.
So we can't predict the future,
No,
but we can certainly analyze the present and try to make more informed decisions.
Exactly.
All right, so until next time.
Yes.
Keep exploring, keep learning.
Keep learning.
And stay curious.
Absolutely.
All right, see ya.